He was about to sign. The pen, a sleek piece of silver and obsidian, hovered over the contract, a document worth a cool $100 million. The room was silent, thick with the smell of money and power. Victory was just a heartbeat away. But then, the one person nobody was watching, the one person who was basically invisible, leaned in. She moved with a quiet purpose that cut right through the tension. And with a whisper that shattered the silence, she said 4 words that would either save his empire or ruin it completely. That's the wrong formula. To understand how a single sentence from a waitress could stop a titan's world from spinning, we have to rewind 3 hours to the moment Ethan Cross walked into the Imperial Grand Hotel, absolutely convinced the world belonged to him, and that nothing and no one could ever prove him wrong. Ethan Cross wasn't just successful, he was success. As the billionaire CEO of Cross Tea Industries, an empire built on renewable energy and pharmaceuticals, he moved through the world with the gravitational pull of a small planet. His mind was a fortress of data and relentless ambition. People respected him. They feared him. And above all, they knew he was never, ever wrong. That day, he was on the verge of his greatest achievement yet, a $100 million deal with a powerful European biotech firm. It all hinged on a revolutionary new compound he'd personally helped develop, something that promised to change medicine forever. The negotiations were happening in a private dining room at the Imperial Grand Hotel, a place so opulent it made palaces look humble. For Ethan, this wasn't just a meeting, it was his coronation. In that same room, moving like a ghost along the edges of power, was Claire Summers. To the men in their $1,000 suits, she was just part of the scenery, a waitress refilling water glasses. But Claire was a ghost of a different kind. Years ago, she'd been one of the brightest minds in her university's biochemistry program. Her future was limitless, but a sudden family tragedy forced her to drop everything, trading a laboratory for a life of quiet service to support her family. She carried her lost dream with silent grace, but behind her tired eyes, the mind of a scientist was still sharp, still observing, still calculating. She saw the world in molecules and reactions, a language nobody in that room knew she spoke. As the meeting went on, Ethan took center stage. He was magnetic, his voice a calm, confident tool of persuasion. He walked the investors through the presentation, his charisma easily masking the ferocious intellect underneath. Then he got to the main event. With a click, a complex biochemical formula lit up the screen behind him. "This," Ethan announced, his arms outstretched, "is the future." It was his masterpiece. The investors leaned in, captivated. His own partners were beaming, their victory lap already planned. Claire was at the back of the room refilling a water pitcher. Her eyes drifted to the screen, just out of habit. At first it was just a string of symbols, but then something caught her eye. It was a tiny detail, so subtle you'd never see it, unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. A single variable in the equation was misplaced. Her heart started pounding. This wasn't just a typo. It was catastrophic. She ran the calculation in her head, that part of her brain firing up from its long slumber. The misplaced variable wouldn't just make the compound useless, it would make it dangerously unstable. The entire $100 million project wasn't just a failure waiting to happen, it was a ticking time bomb. What was she supposed to do? She was a waitress, a nobody. These were giants. Interrupting them? That was professional suicide. She'd be fired, laughed at, and tossed out. The sheer arrogance of it, a server correcting a man like Ethan Cross, was unthinkable. She could just stay quiet. It was the safe choice, the sane choice. Let them sign the papers and walk away. It wasn't her company, not her money, not her problem. But as she watched Ethan Cross pick up that pen, she thought about the people this was supposed to help. She thought about the science she had once dedicated her life to. The silence suddenly became a weight, heavier than any tray she had ever carried. Her conscience was screaming a truth her voice was terrified to speak. The investors were smiling. The lawyers were ready. Ethan Cross, with a final triumphant look at his team, lowered his pen to the paper. In that instant, Claire moved. She walked from the back of the room, her footsteps unnervingly quiet on the thick carpet. She wasn't carrying a tray or a pitcher. She was carrying a terrible truth. She walked right past the executives, her eyes locked on Ethan. She leaned in, a sudden intrusion into his perfect moment, and whispered those 4 words. "That's the wrong formula." The world didn't actually stop, but for Ethan Cross it sure felt like it did. His hand froze. He turned, his eyes flashing first with confusion, then with pure anger. Who was this woman? Who did she think she was? "Excuse me?" he said, his voice dangerously low. His partners looked horrified. The investors shot each other confused glances. Claire didn't back down. In that same quiet, steady whisper, she explained the error. She didn't use big words to show off. She just spoke the simple, devastating facts. She pointed to the misplaced variable on the screen and explained how it would destabilize the whole compound, turning a miracle cure into a biohazard. As she spoke, Ethan's face began to change. The fury in his eyes was replaced by a dawning horror. He was a scientist before he was a CEO, and his brain, despite his pride, recognized the cold, hard logic in her words. He stared at the formula, his own brilliant creation, and for the first time saw the fatal flaw hiding in plain sight. She was right. The waitress was right. A wave of humiliation washed over him, but it was followed by something stronger, immense, soul-shaking relief. She hadn't just corrected him. She had saved him. She had saved his reputation, his company, and the hundreds of millions of dollars he was about to waste on a disaster. Breaking the stunned silence, Ethan slowly put down his pen. He stood up, his posture no longer arrogant, but humbled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice ringing with a new kind of authority, "it appears we have a critical error in our formula." He turned and looked directly at Claire. "And we have this young lady to thank for finding it." Right there in front of everyone, he gave her credit for her sharp eye and expertise. He explained the correction to the investors, and his honesty turned a moment of disaster into an incredible display of integrity. The deal wasn't just saved, it was now stronger than ever. After the corrected deal was signed, the investors left, buzzing with a story they'd tell for the rest of their lives. Ethan found Claire as she was quietly getting ready to end her shift. "I don't know who you are," he said, all the earlier arrogance gone from his voice, "but you may have just saved my company." He asked for her story, so Claire told him everything. About her passion for biochemistry, her abandoned degree, and the life that got in the way. Ethan listened, not as a billionaire to a waitress, but as one scientist to another. The next day, Claire got an offer from Cross T Industries. It wasn't for a thank you bonus. It was a job as a senior researcher on his biotech team, with a full scholarship to go back and finish her PhD, all paid for by him. Claire Summers walked into that hotel a waitress and walked out a scientist, her future reborn. Ethan Cross walked in as a titan who thought he knew it all, and walked out as a leader who had learned that genius can be found anywhere, and that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one no one is watching. Now, it's worth saying that the story of Ethan Cross and Claire Summers is a fictional one, meant to teach a lesson. The characters aren't real, and the CEO in this story shouldn't be confused with the real-life Dr. Ethan Cross, who's an amazing expert on controlling our inner voice and the author of the book, Chatter. But the themes here are very real. It just goes to show you that your circumstances don't define your worth. Courage and integrity hold immense power, no matter your job title. And it proves that the most important voice doesn't always have to be the loudest. Sometimes it's the quietest one, just waiting for the right moment to change the world. What do you think? Would you have had the courage to speak up? Let us know in the comments. And for more stories that inspire, don't forget to subscribe.